Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Snap Out of It, the Mental Illness in the Workplace podcast with me, Natasha Tracy. Today we are talking with Cara McNulty, President of Behavioral Health and Mental Wellbeing at CVS Health, a leading provider of mental health and employee assistance program solutions. She oversees a national team that spearheads the development of CVS Health and Aetna's programs, products, and capabilities designed to offer individuals easy access to treatments and meet people wherever they are along the continuum of mental wellness. I want to remind our audience that this is a live stream, so pop your questions for Cara in the comment box at any time, and we might just answer them during the podcast. But before we get to Cara, I just want to remind people that while workplace mental health is very important, this podcast actually aims to highlight workplace mental illness. Now, 1 in 5 people have a diagnosable mental illness, but these people are often left out of the conversation when we talk about mental health in general. So this particular podcast aims to shine the light on that 20% of people. Hi, Cara. Welcome to Snap Out of
Hi.
It.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here today.
Oh, I'm grateful to be here.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and your role.
Sure. So, I am a population health scientist. And what that means is I study a population, look at what's getting in the way of people being their ideal self from a health aspect, then look at what can you do about it? How do you do rapid testing and solution innovation and remove barriers? And what I found out early in my career is no matter what is happening in someone's life, they have a new cancer diagnosis, they're having a baby, they are making a big transition, they're getting married, they have an accident, they have a new job, there is always a mental health component. And usually that mental health component is really at the core of a person's health well-being. And so I started focusing on mental health well-being because when we focus on mental health as well as mental illness, we really can connect the whole head and heart ecosystem. So at CVS Health Aetna, I lead a team that provides support, clinical services, and solutions across think of the continuum of mental health well-being. So from low acuity to stress, anxiety, burnout, all the way through to mental illness. And it is a pleasure to lead this team and do this work because on a daily basis, we get to help people be their best and normalize this conversation that everyone is impacted by their own mental health well-being and those around them.
Well, thank you. I think you put it so well. And I love the way you said a head and heart system, I believe is what you said, or heart and body system, something like that. And that was beautiful. I think that we often think of mental illness over here and our bodies over here, and that they're not somehow connected. But of course, we know that mental illness is not just in the mind. Mental illness is not even just in the brain, but mental illness is throughout the body. So thank you so much for recognizing that and bringing it forward.
Absolutely.
So I want to start by asking about your personal experience with mental illness. I believed you experienced mental illness with your second pregnancy. Can you tell me what that was like and what that did in the workplace, if anything?
Sure. You know, I'm a health scientist. I've had my first baby. My husband and I have a second child 23 months later. And her name is Isabel. Isabel gets diagnosed with RSV, which is a respiratory issue, and can be very dangerous and can be deadly. Isabel was 6 months at the time, which is really a time in a baby's life that for a child to get RSV, it's a little safer because their lungs are more developed. I knew that. I knew all the science. I knew all the education, all the information. But I went right in my head and stayed there. And what happened is I started checking on Isabel all the time, making sure she was breathing, because it's a breathing issue.
Right.
And then I decided, well, instead of checking on her, I'll just hold her. I'll just hold her, because then I know she's breathing. Makes sense? Now remember, I have a 2-year-old at the time and a newborn. And a husband who's absolutely engaged, an ecosystem that's involved, and here I am in the health field. And I went from I'll hold her to I really don't need to eat because then I have to lay her down, to who needs to shower? I'm in my pajamas, I'm good, to sitting on the floor, holding her, delirious, crying, my 2-year-old sitting next to me saying, Mama sad, and me not having the wherewithal to know that I was experiencing postpartum anxiety. And my husband, I'll never forget this, sat on the floor and he said, I don't know what's happening, but I know this is not how it's supposed to be. And you always tell me that we should ask for help. And when we ask for help, it's a sign of courage. And I said, you're right, I need help. And so I have, from that experience, I'm very passionate. I have always been passionate about mental health and mental illness. And then it happens to you. And what you realize is everybody's impacted. Not only was I impacted, but my 2-year-old, my baby, my husband, my mother, it impacts your ecosystem. But here I am. I have all the tools. I have the education. I have the research. And Natasha, I couldn't get myself off that floor.
Yeah.
And what I have learned is by asking for help, learning more about things like postpartum depression and anxiety and other illnesses, it is empowering. It is so empowering. I had what I didn't know is anxiety all along.
Right.
But I thought I was just being nervous, or I was just worrying too much. And so I will tell you, it has made me not only an empathetic advocate, it has made me a fierce advocate for the reality that we all are impacted by our own mental health and that of others. And it's normal. It's normal. It's really normal to have a mental illness or an episodic situation or a brief encounter with, let's say, social anxiety. It's really normal.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It must have been such a painful time for you, and I really appreciate you allowing me to ask you about it, because it's something that I know so many people have grappled with, either yes, in a pregnancy, but maybe nothing to do with a pregnancy. And so, sitting on that floor and not being able to move, it just shows you how powerful mental illness really is. It absolutely 100% can control you at times.
Oh, completely. And what I didn't know, Natasha, is it was this gradual change.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
What I thought was really rational behavior, it all made so much sense.
Yeah.
And it took my own partner saying, you told me, you tell people all the time it takes courage to ask for help.
Yeah.
We need help here. We need help. And that is probably, those words, I need help, are so empowering. So empowering and hard.
Very, very hard. But as you said, empowering. And, I always tell people, if you don't ask for help, you can't get help. In other words, you can't get better. So, those words are scary. I will be the first to admit that. But they are also the words that are going to help you get to the other side of whatever you're struggling with. So thank you. And can you tell me, how is your mental health today?
I love that question. I can tell you that my mental health most days is really great. And I work very hard at it. I treat it just like my physical health. You know, I need rest because when I'm not rest, I'm more anxious. Just like my physical body, we need rest. The better I eat, the better I feel mentally and emotionally. You know, I specifically do things that take care of my physical health and my mental health. And I will tell you what I have learned is I need my own time out. You know, so now my daughters are, one just is a freshman in college. We just dropped her off. And my youngest, Isabel, is going into 11th grade. And I deployed taking a time out a long time ago. And that is where I calm myself. I regulate my breathing. I shut off all the distractions of maybe it's music or social media or people talking, and I just get centered. And so I would tell you, Natasha, most days it's really good. But when I don't work at it, when I don't invest in it, and when I ignore the signs that I know and have learned, I can spiral down in a second. And so it's ongoing. Yeah. It's an ongoing journey. 1 + 1 isn't 2. It's like 5 or 7.
Right.
You know,
yes.
It is what it is. And I've learned along the way, instead of judging myself and having critical feedback for myself, I lean in with empathy. Like, hey, I got to slow down.
Yeah.
I often think about holding Isabel and how she needed just that care and feeding, you know, that literal nurturing. I think about that for myself. Like, this is my body, my head and my heart saying it needs just some care and feeding.
Thank you for that. I think that so many of us show empathy for others and yet have no empathy for ourselves. But exactly what you said is what people need. We need empathy, the kind that we show for other people. We need to show it for ourselves as well. Who deserves it more than us? We do.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I would say, and Natasha, you know this well, that we have to, in order to change this narrative, we have to show not only empathy and support and advocacy for people who are struggling all over, but we have to show them that we're showing empathy and kindness to ourselves.
Yes.
That it's okay. It's really okay.
Okay, folks, you are tuned in to Snap Out of It, the Mental Illness in the Workplace podcast. I am talking with Cara McNulty, President of Behavioral Health and Mental Wellbeing at CVS Health Aetna. We are talking mental illness in the workplace, and we're going to be talking about living up to your potential. Now, don't forget, if you have any questions for Cara, please pop them in the comment box, and we may just answer them on air. So you said something to me, that the thing that gets in the way of people being their best is mental health. And certainly from my perspective, untreated mental illness is a huge roadblock in people fulfilling their potential. So do you think your personal experience with mental illness, and you've already said it made you more passionate, so you feel like that has gotten you to a place where you can stand in the shoes of people with other mental illnesses, even when their experiences are vastly different?
You know, I do, and I would tell you that I think sometimes mental health or mental illness isn't the primary factor. You know, maybe it's a cancer diagnosis that then brings up something else that deals with our head and our heart, that mental and physical. Or it is a serious mental illness and it's causing other things. Maybe you've lost a job or you've had a breakup. So they're just all connected, and you said it so well. I know neither of us woke up today and said, oh gosh, today I'm just going to focus on my mental health. Or today I'm just going to focus on my physical health. I mean, we get up, we think about the things we have to do, where we're going, what's on our list, you know, life takes over. So there's always that mental and physical. And I would tell you that, yes, it has changed me. I would be probably overstepping by saying, I know what it's like to walk in others' shoes.
Sure.
But what I would tell you is I listen different.
Mm-hmm.
I solution a heck of a lot differently.
Yeah.
And I work to empower people to share their story like you do so beautifully. Because when we listen and we can hear what is getting in the way, we then who are in positions to solution and drive change, whether that's policies or solutions or systems, can really deploy things that make a broader impact. And that's important.
So, do you really feel that it's an employer's place to care about those struggling with mental illness at work? And if you do, what actually is the benefit to the employer?
I absolutely believe that when you think about employers who are thriving, who are driving their impact, whether that impact is for social good or it's profitability or it's growth, whatever that may be, it is employers who are leaning into what cultural diversity looks like and inclusion. And inclusion, a culture of inclusion, is accepting us as humans as we are, the great things we are, the things that are a little rough around the edges,
Yeah.
and our mental and physical health. And when employers do that, when they have that inclusive, diverse, empowering environment and culture, guess what? They do better. They have lower turnover. They have higher return in investment. They have greater profitability because you allow people not to have to be someone at home and then somebody different at work. And, nobody wants to pretend. Everybody wants to show up and be who they are. And the reality is, most of us have a family member, our own self, a partner, a parent, a loved one, a neighbor, a child that has a serious mental illness.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I said it was 20% of people with a diagnosable mental illness, and that is the number. So when you talk about 1 in 5 people, that means that if there's 5 people in your workplace, and there probably are, at least one of them has a diagnosable mental illness. So of course it touches everyone. Of course it touches every family. Of course it touches every single workplace. I mean, it sort of seems like the obvious thing, and yet I think people often miss that really obvious thing sometimes.
Right. And I do think, Natasha, that people, we know 20% have a mental illness, a serious mental illness, and we know that number is underreported.
Sure.
When I think about Black and Brown communities and adolescents, we know that number is underreported. Often in workplaces and in that culture and the environment, I think people shy away. I've seen it many a time from the conversation, not because they don't want to address it, because I hear people say this to me all the time. What if I don't know what to say?
Sure.
What if I say the wrong thing?
Yeah.
What if I hurt someone's feelings? And the reality is, when we don't address it, when we don't acknowledge it, when we don't have the conversation, we're giving the message that it's not important.
Yeah.
You can't talk about that here. It's not safe. And it's a worse outcome.
I think you're also really giving the message that there's something wrong with you if you have a mental illness, because we're not talking about it because we don't want to talk about what's wrong with you. Like, I really think that's the message. The message is really entirely negative, which is that if you have a mental illness, you're broken in some way. And so we're not talking about that brokenness. And the other thing that I think happens all the time is that people with mental illness think they're the only one because of this complete silence that so many people experience. And of course, one of the things that happens in my writing all the time is I have bipolar disorder, and people who read my work often have bipolar disorder, and they go, "Oh my God, I can't believe it wasn't just me." And it's never just you, I promise.
That is so true. It is in a community where we can be so engaged technologically, and although the pandemic hindered our ability to socially engage, but we can connect when we don't talk, when we don't normalize, when we don't change the rhetoric around mental illness, mental health, mental well-being. We then even expand the stigma, and we do create environments where people feel completely alone when there's so many people who are going through something similar. It might not be exact, but similar.
And so, what do you think employers can do to help those struggling with mental illness other than, say, start the conversation? Like, what else is there?
Yeah, there's so many exciting things that employers can do, and I'll start with what we at CVS Health have done. So we have a lot of conversations, but conversation isn't enough. No. It's just not enough. No. So we do things that I'm going to say we started with the easier. So we developed a colleague resource group that is all about mental health, well-being, including mental illness. That colleague resource group has been started just over a year ago, and we had over 3,000 members within the first couple of months.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's amazing. And what's so empowering is you hear people coming to those events and engaging, saying, this is the first time I have felt comfortable in talking about my partner who is schizophrenic, or this is the first time I feel validated that it's okay that I'm a brilliant employee and I also struggle with serious depression.
Sure.
So we started there, really easy, setting up a colleague resource group. It's not enough. We also then said, this isn't about what's wrong, and you talked about it, or what is broken. Mm-hmm. We have worked to normalize that your head and your heart aren't separate. So we talk about ourselves as a head first health company, that we're not thinking about your physical health separate from your mental health. Mm-hmm. And that's in everything we do. If you're going into a minute clinic and you're going to see someone because you have a sinus infection or you think you have a sinus infection, we're going to ask you a couple of questions about your mental health. Because you know what? We don't have to make it so people have to jump over hurdles to get support. So we even look at how we're talking about mental and physical health together. So we do that. The other thing we do is we really we remove as many barriers as possible for people to get support that matters to them.
Right.
And that started by doing a lot of listening. Mm-hmm. What are employees saying? What are they feeling? What are they needing? And that's different than us just coming out saying, here you go, here's what we're going to offer.
Right. Totally different. Yep.
And so by doing that, then you design benefits and resources for all employees, whether they're on your medical plan or not, that really focus on allowing people to be their best in the workplace and outside. So it's everything, as I talked about, from developing colleague resource groups to changing how we deliver care, to how we talk about mental health and physical health, and even how we as leaders work to share stories, to continue to normalize. I mean, there's not a person probably in the country, maybe even in the world, that through a pandemic hasn't experienced some type of mental health disruption.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a serious mental illness, but maybe that's where it came to life. But everybody's experienced some disruption. And it's just a great way to take a moment to think, oh, this is really normal. I mean, maybe you experience more stress or some anxiety. Maybe you started drinking more.
Sure.
And maybe what came out is a compulsive behavior, and you were now diagnosed with a mental illness. I mean, there's just so many things, but we can change the narrative with our words, but also with our actions.
Thank you so much. I think so much of what you've said regarding what employers can do for people is so powerful. I know every employer can't do that. Every single employer can't do what you're talking about, but what every employer can do is set up one of those employee resource groups. That's something that's doable for, I think, any employer. And changing the conversation, that's something that people can do. And you know what? What I really like to say to people is the next time you hear someone making a joke about mental health or mental illness, tell them it's not okay. It's not okay.
It's absolutely true. It's not okay. And we don't joke about other things like we often joke about mental health.
Right.
And it's really important. Words matter. The other thing that employers can do, and many employers lean in, you have an employee assistance program.
Right.
And I want to advocate so dearly that employee assistance programs, they're not the employee assistance programs that maybe your mom and dad had in the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
It isn't the number you call because you think you're going to get fired. Right. Employee assistance programs are really designed to help you meet the needs of what you're experiencing, whether that's a physical need, a mental health need. It's a short-term interaction counseling. Most employers have an employee assistance program.
Right.
And the unfortunate part is many people don't use it because they think it's not confidential. It has to be by nature and by how it's set up. So lean into your employee assistance programs. They work.
So folks, this is Snap Out of It, and we are talking to Cara McNulty, the President of Behavioral Health and Mental Wellbeing at CVS Health Aetna. We are still taking your questions. Pop them into the comment box wherever you're watching, and we may just answer them on air. So you've also said that voices with mental illness are suppressed, quieted, and shamed. Now, I couldn't agree more. And unfortunately, that happens all too frequently in the workplace. So what do you think can be done specifically with regard to that issue?
Yeah, I think about as a mother, it's important that my own children know the struggles that I've had, that I have, to help normalize it.
Yeah.
We live together. They see it, they know it. Now take that into a workplace. If we don't normalize the conversation, I really can't show up and be my best. So if I have to hide that, hey, I've had severe postpartum anxiety, I have anxiety, and gosh, I am able to do an awesome job. I am doing my best as a spouse, as a mother, as a daughter, a sister, and I'm not perfect. If I can't show up that way, they don't get my best. They don't get my best. And so it's why we have to look at what are the services we're offering people and not making it hard for people to get that support. I mean, you've talked about it. I talked about sitting on the floor.
Yeah.
We have to make support so easy that people aren't in crisis.
Yeah.
That we can normalize this conversation. So it's really important that we as communities change how we talk about mental illness, that we as employers embrace that this is normal. This is part of who we are as humans, and that we work to listen to where are those voices being quelled. And I think about, adolescents, young adults, LGBTQ population often being quelled. But parents often are afraid to talk. And so we have to listen differently. Because when we do that and we're open to the reality that this is normal, then as employers, it's not so scary. You get to empower instead of react.
Which is beautiful. You said something that I think is so important that I wish employers and everyone else would take on board, which is, help needs to be so easy to get that you can literally get it from sitting on when you're sitting on your floor of your living room, right? It should be that easy to get help. And so I just wanted to do a quick plug for the new suicide prevention helpline, and it's 988 in the United States now. And it's so important that people understand that if they need help of any sort, any type of distress, you do not have to be suicidal to call. You just dial 988 and they're going to be able to help you. They're going to be able to listen to you and possibly get you resources that you didn't even know existed. So please remember that. Help is always there for you. It's a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week service. So don't forget. So I know that you and CVS Health have done many surveys of employees. So what do you think employees want from their employers when it comes to mental health and mental illness assistance?
We've done a lot of research. We've written quite a few white papers. And when you think about it, right now, most of the workforce is feeling burned out.
Sure.
We've experienced a pandemic. We've changed how we've worked. If you have children, you've not only worked maybe from home, but also been a teacher on the side. And, life was disrupted. People are burned out, and people want different benefits that meet not only their needs, but the needs of their family. And when I say family, I mean your ecosystem, whoever you consider to be your family. Mm-hmm. And that means, maybe you don't have children, but you take care of your parents or you take care of your neighbor. Employees want support for their ecosystem. They don't want support just for themselves. Employees want flexibility. If there's anything we know about mental health and your physical well-being, is that people need flexibility to be able to take care of themselves in order to take care of their ecosystem and do their job their best. So we see employees really saying, I need flexibility. I'd like a flexible work schedule. We also see employees wanting support with their social determinants. So think of, maybe finding appropriate daycare. Maybe your daycare closed and you can't find daycare. Mm-hmm. Or you have an elderly parent that needs elder care, helping the employee find elder care for their parent. It might be you've had a change in your financial status, and that financial status, maybe you were 2 people working and now it's a 1-person family that's working. So maybe you need some financial resources. So we see employees wanting support for themselves, support for their ecosystem, and support addressing their social determinants, because it all is intertwined. And then last, with that flexibility, employees don't want us to address their mental health as if it's not on our body, different from their physical health.
Right.
You have to look at it together. And there's just so many. One of the great things of the pandemic is this complete infusion of venture capital backed investment to new mental health and mental illness solutions.
Yeah.
And so employees want things that meet their needs, not this is what we have, so this is what we're always going to do.
Right. Yeah. I think that is so right when it comes to things like flexibility and support. In your life outside of work, you need flexibility and support. So it makes perfect sense that you would need flexibility and support from an employer as well. Again, it's one of those, oh my goodness, of course moments. And yet we've missed it for years, that's what employees are asking for and needing. So, yeah.
Well, it's also the piece that ties in there is that people want to be themselves at work.
Yeah.
They don't want to come to work and now have to be somebody very different. And that hiding, that not allowing people to be their full self, then we don't get the best of people. And, what is amazing is the brilliance, the fierce, the quirky, the nerdy, the loving, the thoughtful, the innovative. That's what you want. And all of it.
I love that. And I think that if you just think about for a second what it would be like if we expected employees to hide the fact that they had a spouse or hide the fact that they had kids and what that would do to them at work. Because mental illness can easily play as big a role as a spouse or children. And so asking someone to hide it is like asking them to hide the fact that they're married or that they have children. And that's something we would never expect people to do. And yet we expect them to do it with mental health. So yeah, it's important.
Absolutely.
Now, we had a question come in from Elizabeth. What are some practical starting points for becoming more comfortable with conversations around mental illness, both in the workplace and in all social spheres?
Great question, Elizabeth. I love it. One of the things that I talk to people all the time about is really taking the risk and having the courage to truly ask people, how are you doing? And I don't mean, Natasha, that you and I are passing in the hall and I just say, hey, how you doing?
Right.
I mean the for reals, legit. I see you or we're working together. I'm asking you, hey, how are you doing? And I mean it. How are you doing? And the person knows I mean it. You know I mean it.
Right.
When we are willing to do that and not worry about what the person is going to respond with, we open up a whole new conversation. And it doesn't mean I have to have all the answers or that I have to be afraid. What it means is I need to listen without judgment and sit in support.
Yeah.
So one of the easiest things we can do is ask people how they are. And when they tell you they're not good, have the courage to ask, when you say you're not good, have you thought about self-harm? Have you thought about what it would be like to not be here?
Right.
You ask those questions. It's pretty simple, but it's hard to do in theory. And you brought up 988. If someone were to say, yes, I have thought about that, dialing 988 with that friend is thoughtful, is easy. Connecting that friend, taking that friend to an emergency room or to a care provider, most of the time, that's not what the person is going to respond, but that's the worst possible outcome. And guess what? Anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Everybody has done things that are hard. Anyone can do that. And it makes a difference. So it's a great place to start. It's a great place to start. And Elizabeth, having, starting an employer or starting an employer-sponsored mental illness or mental health colleague work group is a great way to also make an impact because it shows, hey, I'm willing to engage in conversation.
Right. The podcast was lucky enough to interview someone from Johnson & Johnson, and this particular person did just that. She started a group for people with mental illness, and it just blossomed. It grew exponentially to the point where she couldn't handle it herself anymore with thousands of people around the world. And it really does work, right? One person can actually make that much of a difference for a large company. And if your company is small, you can make that kind of difference for a portion of those employees as well. So you're not powerless in this. And when someone says to you that they're not doing well, the other thing that I really would say is try to resist telling them, oh, you're fine, right? Because the thing is, we all want everyone to be fine all the time. And that's a totally normal thing, right? Someone says to you, I'm having a bad day, and you go, oh, don't worry, it's almost Friday. You negate what they're trying to say to you because you want them to be fine. And I get this. I totally do. But when you want to talk about mental health, you want to try to just dial that back and say, oh, you're not having a good day. Can you tell me more about that? That's it. You just, instead of, your own reflex, which is to say you're fine, you just, ignore that reflex and start opening a conversation. That's important.
Oh gosh, that's such a great point, Natasha. It's so important because when we have the courage to say we're not doing well, what we don't want to have happen is to feel like someone isn't hearing us.
Yeah.
Like you just had the courage to say, I'm not doing well. And we as the advocate and the asker need to be the listener.
Yeah.
And it's okay not to be okay. One of the things I say often is when people say to me, if I can just make it to Friday, or if I can just make it to my vacation.
Right.
Oh, we don't have to just make it. We don't have to be in pain like that. And we don't have to do this alone.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think we're actually out of time, so I do want to end it there for today. But I'd really like to thank Cara McNulty for sharing her experience and very specialized knowledge with us. And also, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for listening. Please join me next week when I will be talking to Mike Vini, who is a keynote speaker, author, certified corporate wellness specialist, and someone who has experienced mental illness firsthand. He's going to be talking to us about how he has managed to become a leading corporate mental health speaker despite a mental health breakdown only 5 years ago. Drop by the podcast's website at snapoutofitpodcast.com and join our mailing list for more information. Snap Out of It recordings are available on your favorite podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you find us there, we would love a review. And if you'd like to be a guest on Snap Out of It, check out our website and fill out the guest application form. Again, that's at snapoutofitpodcast.com. My name is Natasha Tracy. I hope you have a great week and great mental health.